G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with the second video in the build series, the HMA Toys 1/8000 scale Brünhild from the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. At the end of the last video I mentioned that I was going to attach the post to the bottom of the hull. So you can see I've drilled the hole out there, but I think I might actually leave putting the epoxy putty in until I've actually painted all this up and got this insert piece sort of in place, because that way I can also use the putty to sort of hold that as well. So I'm just going to hold off on that for a bit. But I've got up to the colour selection, and I've got to say I've found a bit of a major flaw with the instructions in this kit. The assembly instructions are fine, and you know, if you read through of course the instructions are all in Japanese, but if you use a translator or whatever, you know, you shouldn't have too many issues. But most of the instructions that are listed in Japanese are basically, you know, like watch out, make sure you've got the right parts because they are different, you know, left and right. Or it talks about painting bits separately before you glue them together. There's no specific colour call out sort of within the actual instructions itself. The only indication of the colours is down here where we've got what's that? That's a special Brünhild white. So obviously Mr. Colour put out a specific colour. We've got what's that one? Battleship, I think. I looked it up. It's an FS 36081 grey, I think. And then we have burnt iron or steel. And then finally we have super chrome. So yeah, there's not a lot of colours in this kit, but it's actually tricky to work out which colours align to what, because the photographs here can be a little bit deceptive, and I'm not quite sure if I'm going to get these right or not. So it's pretty obvious where the white goes, so that's not a problem. And for that I will first start with Surfacer White, and then I'm going to use this White Pearl by SMS. So this has got just a little bit of a, you know, pearlescent finish to it, and I think it'll just give it a little bit of extra pop. So the white's not a drama. The black iron or the steel colour. Now it looks like that is used sort of where it indicates sort of darker metal colours, but there's no reference to the inset or the dark colour in the trench here, which, you know, I assume it should all be C28, this steel or black iron colour. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do there, because I think it's pretty obvious on the top where we've got sort of some dark areas, and then we've got some sort of more chrome parts. But for the inset areas, I don't know if I want to go with sort of a metallic. I'm thinking sort of more of a, you know, like a really dark black, you know, something like camo black. So I'm thinking I might do that, just because at that scale, even if it was metallic, I don't think you would see sort of that much shine, you know, certainly in the shadow areas and that sort of thing. So I think I'm going to go with camo black, and I'm going to start with Surfacer Black first for the primer, and then I'll go with this camo black over the top of that. For the chrome bits, so they have these sort of mirrored domes on the side. There's a lot of sort of chrome on the top as well. So for that I'm going to use SMS Hyperchrome, and I'm actually I'm trying to work out how I'm going to do the chrome bits, just especially these domes on the side. I've seen some people sort of hand paint them and stuff, and I really don't want to do that. So, and they're pretty small to mask, so I haven't decided how I'm going to paint those yet, but when I get to it I'll certainly explain that. But I will be using this Hyperchrome. So these are supposed to be sort of mirrored surfaces. And for this battleship grey they talk about, C31, I think that's for all the details in the inset part. So if you look at sort of the back and also the front, there's sort of all these details. Now in the photo it almost looks like they're metallic, but I think they're actually supposed to be sort of grey. They're not necessarily supposed to be sort of the super chrome. So I'm going to paint them grey, and I'll be painting them by hand because there's no way I'm going to be able to mask all those little details. So for that, I'm actually going to use Vallejo Mecha Color Grey. So I'll brush paint those on. And then there's a little detail. It's like one of the radar dishes or something down the bottom here, which it doesn't even have a call out for that colour. But for that, I'm going to use some titanium silver. So this is actually some enamel paint. So I'm using a good mix of, you know, different colour brands and colour paint types. But yeah, hopefully I'll sort of get close to what I'm looking for. So first step for me is to get all the priming done. And of course you can see I've sort of been doing a lot more work on sort of clean up and sanding things back. But I'll give that a uniform white surface primer before I put the white pearl over the top. I know this stuff is reasonably transparent, so you know, it helps to have a good white base down behind it before you put this down. Alright, so time to get painting. I think I've covered everything. The last one is, for the dark sort of steel areas or burnt iron, for that I'll be using SMS metallic steel. So I think that's all the colours I'll be using. I think that's pretty much it. But the instructions are just a bit problematic in the fact they don't actually sort of point to particular areas to call out the colours. So it's a bit of a shame. I think it would have been, you know, nice to do that. They've got these sort of beautiful images of the finished kit here. You'd think it wouldn't take much to have a few arrows sort of going to different parts of them to show, you know, what colour goes where. Because the rest of the instructions are pretty good, you know, it's pretty clear how the kit goes together, but it's just a shame they sort of haven't gone down the path of being prescriptive with the colour callouts. I've got some of the initial painting done, so I just want to sort of point out my progress so far. First of all, for the hull, the white, I used the white pearl, and I'm really happy with the way that's come up. Now, just a warning, if you're using this stuff, it is very transparent, so you definitely need a white primer coat underneath, but it does have a really nice sort of shimmer to it. So I haven't put a gloss coat or anything over this, and I really don't want to because I kind of like the finish as it is. It's not super shiny, but you still get the, you know, the pearl effect of it. So happy with that. So I've done the top and of course the bottom as well. Now, both the top and the bottom have these little domes here, which I'll have to mask off, and I'm going to paint them with the Hyperchrome Cold Tone. Now, while I'm talking about the Hyperchrome, just to sort of show, I painted, this is a piece that goes on the top, and I painted this with the Hyperchrome, but then I threw a gloss coat over the top of it. And I did that because I've had issues with masking this particular paint in the past, just the Hyperchrome stuff, where it sort of lifts if I don't put a coat over the top of it. But it does change the colour substantially, and you can sort of see that if I bring up another piece like this, which has not been coated. So I've got very much that really nice kind of chrome look. Okay. But as soon as you put a gloss coat over it, it does dull it down a little bit. Now for both the top and the bottom pieces, that's not an issue because I wanted a slightly different colour anyway. And now I've sort of got to mask these off and do the areas that I'm going to do in steel. That's usually the case with most sort of, you know, chrome based paints, you know, try to emulate the look of chrome. As soon as you put a gloss coat over them, you tend to sort of lose that sort of mirror finish. Obviously I've done the the base of the hull in the same white pearl. I'm pretty happy with that. I will have to, you know, there's some still slight areas that are a bit of an issue, but I'm not going to worry about them because they're right underneath. But one thing that I do have to do is sort of mask off the rest of this to paint this front piece. So that's a combination of the sort of black and some grey highlights, and then there's a couple of very fiddly pieces to stick on there. So I need to get that masked off and painted. The top of that section I just showed also has these pipe details on the top, so I will mask those off and I'll probably paint them using steel. And then I can run sort of an enamel wash to bring out those details. Now for the sides of the trench, there's two little dome details which I've done the hyperchrome, and the rest of this area is, I sort of painted, this is just black primer. I was going to use camo black, but I've decided against it, and the reason for that is for this area here, in order to sort of, I wasn't going to mask out those details, I'm going to brush paint the black back in, and I think for that I'm just going to use some enamel paint, some XF1 flat black. So I'm going to do that for this particular part, but also for this side bit. So there's really no way to mask off all those little domes, so it's just going to be really fiddly to sort of paint the details in, but I'm going to paint that all with XF1, so black enamel paint, and we'll see how we go. So I've got a lot of work to do still. There's sort of masking and stuff I want to get sorted first, and then we can look at sort of some of the brush painting as well. Everything's masked up, ready to go. So for the bottom and the top of the hull, there's this tiny little dome that I'll be painting first. I'll give it a hit with the black primer, so just SMS surface of black, and then I'm going to hit it with the hyperchrome cold tone. So it's just that one there. So I literally did all this masking just for that tiny dot, and also for the other half of the hull there's another one there. So cutting out those circles, the panel lines in there are quite deep, so you could, if you're really careful, run a knife around there, but I just used my display circle cutter, and so this was one of those domes, was nearly 3 millimeters in diameter. So this thing, thankfully, you can cut quite small circles with quite accurately. Yeah, so that's the hull done. There's the this top bit here, these two sort of pipe details. I'll be again doing that with black first, and then SMS steel. So just to give it a different sort of metallic look. So for this front piece here, I've sort of masked that off. I've just used lots of little bits of tape to sort of mask it off. So that'll be painted SMS black, surface of black, and then I'm going to hand paint all the details in there. So that one was a little bit fiddly to mask. And then we've got this top piece. So these sort of pipe devices, again, I'll be painting them with the metallic steel, and same with the bottom pipe details. Okay, so I've taken off the masking and am pretty happy with the results. So there's a little bit of variation there. I think this silver here is probably a bit too bright, so I think I can use a panel line wash just to darken it down a bit. So we can see this top bit, masking's worked reasonably well. Once we get panel line wash in there, we'll clean up some of those edges. Now for the front bit, the masking has worked pretty well, and I've actually started painting in, just brush painting with the Mecha Color Grey. And so that's just with a tiny brush. I need to go over it again, but it's just to pick out some of the details on there, just to give it a little bit of life. And so I've done the same thing for this other part here. Again, it looks pretty rough because it's still only the first coat, but you get the idea, just picking out some of those details. Pretty happy with the domes. They came up pretty well. So I just need to get some panel line wash in there. So also on this one. So that's pretty happy with that. So let's take these things and get a bit of panel line wash in them, see how they go. Always give it a good shake before you use it. And then I'm just going to run it along the edge here. And so that will wick down into all the recesses. So you can sort of see the difference there. Now for that middle bit, I think I'm going to just coat it in the panel line wash, because I want to darken that down a little bit. So I'm literally just brushing it on. So I'm essentially giving everything just a light coat of the panel line wash. We should still get enough of the contrast there between the two different colours, but it's a bit tricky with the call outs, you know. It's sort of I can't quite get where the colours are supposed to go, so I am making this up as I go along. So you can see still a little bit of contrast there. Just helps pick out some of those details a little better. So if we sort of compare, you know, side by side what it looks like, you can sort of see it does darken up the whole lot of pretty well, which is what I'm after. And we've got this piece as well. Let me get that on a clip. That's that bit done. Still looks a little bit rough in areas. I think it's starting to bleed a little bit, so I may have to clean that up. But it's alright, this stuff once it dries, you know, I can clean it up with a bit of enamel thinner, so it's not a problem. And of course I've got this one as well. The other thing I've actually done sort of off camera is I have painted in the intakes just with black, and for that I've used XF1, and these side pieces I've already brush painted some of those with the enamel XF1. So these ones are a bit tricky. Definitely had to get my spectacles on to paint these ones. Just got to take your time. So if you compare that to one that hasn't been done yet, you can sort of see the detail that gets painted, but I think that'll work pretty well. Alright, I've done quite a bit of work since the last little update, and most of it has been sort of on stuff that I've done before. So things like putting in panel line washes. I've just used the Tamiya Accent panel line grey, and for where the dome is, just use black. I've shown that a number of times on videos before, so if you're interested in that process, you know, pretty much look at just about any other build I've done. But for the mechanical bits here, I actually sort of covered the, you know, the whole piece in the panel line black, I think this one was, and so it's given it a really sort of rough look. I haven't actually brushed much of it off because I actually prefer that sort of look. So I've also done some sort of very minor panel line work on the engines. Tried to keep it as subtle as possible, so it was just using a bit of grey. The other thing that I've done is I have stuck in this inset piece in here, which has come up alright. So it's sort of stuck in place, and you can also see I use some 2-part epoxy putty to stick in the tube for the stand. So again, this is stuff I've sort of shown on, you know, previous videos I've done. I've already applied the decal on the other one, and I must say these are beautiful decals. They are pre-cut, and they've got that beautiful sort of gold on them. The registration is fantastic, so I certainly don't have any qualms about the quality of the decals provided with the kit. They are going down beautifully. So let's get this one cut off. It's also good they give you spares, so if you mess up, you know, they give you 2 spares of each. Now I'm just dunking this in room temperature water. It's not heated or anything like that. I found that it doesn't take long for it to lift at all. So I'm just going to use a toothpick to sort of work it in place. And of course, because I've filed off the raised detail that has the decal on it. I'm sort of going to guesstimate. There is a dot sort of here that makes it really easy to determine where the center is. It's really just about how far up it goes from the silver dome, and it's not that far. That decal is now moving around on the paper, so I'm going to take it out of the water, dab the excess water off on a bit of paper towel, and then slide it into place. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that this is on the underside of the hull, so you're not going to see that much of the decal. So if you don't get it sort of lined up exactly centered, it's not going to be the end of the world, but that actually looks pretty good. So I'm just going to take a cotton bud, squeegee the moisture out. Alright, so the next step is to take some microsol, lightly coat it, just so the decal beds down properly. You should be fine just with water. It's not a, there's no indents that the decal has to sort of conform into. It's a nice smooth surface on the bottom of the ship, so that's not too much of an issue. Now the next step is to get these side pieces in, because a couple of the engines are going to have to be attached to it. So you want to get these glued in first, and this is where the assembly sort of gets a little bit sort of odd. It's got these sort of slots that these little tabs pull into, but it's not really a sort of positive alignment, I guess is the right word. It sort of tilts one way or outside or inside a little bit, so you just got to try and get it as straight as possible. So I'm just taking some extra thin, just sort it down the side. And it is important to try and get this as straight as possible, because these tabs here, the engine's going to, well, two of the engines will attach to these pieces. So now I forgot to mention when I was doing the decals that I've also stuck on the edge pieces here. They go in reasonably easy. There's sort of a track that they follow, so that's not particularly difficult, and I just use sort of Tamiya cement along the back edge here to fix them in place. Okay, the next thing that we're going to move on to is attaching the engines to this particular piece, so they go to these sides here. But before I do that, I want to drill a hole in the end of this circular bit, and the reason for that is because the wires from the engines are sort of going to be heading out this way, and then I want to feed them back in through here and then down into the base. So for that, I'm just going to use a 2mm drill bit, but I'm going to just mark a hole. And so I just want to drill this out. I made the mistake of not doing the drilling before I attached the engine, so the engines kept popping off. So I need to get that done first. I think that should be alright. Okay, so speaking of wiring, I've taken out the blue tack on the ends. Now because these are painted, I'm going to super glue them in place. But before I do, I want to trim these wires a bit, because the ones that come, these are pre-wired LEDs, so the wires that come with it are quite lengthy. And yeah, so what I'll do is sort of get an idea of how long I need to cut them. Okay, and here is where I have one of the issues with this kit. These engines are supposed to fit onto here, like so, except there's not really a positive. It's sort of got a couple of little indents, but it doesn't feel that positive. It doesn't sort of, it's not like those pegs or whatever. There's quite a bit of sort of move, areas where it can move a little bit. For this I'm using some Bob Smith. This is the extra thick stuff. And this stuff sort of sets in about, was it 10 to 25 seconds. I tend to find that it actually takes, sort of around half a minute. I think that's just because of the environment I'm in. Try and work out roughly where the contact points are. And this is not really going to be seen, so it's not too much of an issue. Okay, so it's just about trying to get them as lined up as best as possible. So yeah, it's just not a really great way. I mean, it could have been a peg or something to line it up. I don't know why they've sort of gone down that path. But anyway, they are now in place. The other thing that I want to sort of highlight too is, and this is something that it's a bit late for me now, but when I compare the engines to, say, the top, you see there's a slight colour difference. The engines are sort of just a bit darker, and the reason for that is because when I did all the sanding and everything on the engines, I primed it in grey just so I could see the any imperfections better, and I think that was a mistake. I probably should have done it in white, because the white pearl is so transparent. It's almost like a clear effect paint you put over. And so this top piece I used white primer, and yeah, it's given me a slight difference. Even though I sort of gave, it looked white to me when I painted, I did give it a white primer, but even that is sort of slightly transparent, so there's still a little bit of grey coming through. So there will be a bit of colour difference between the engines and also the bottom component of the hull. Okay, the next thing to do is to attach the top to this piece, and so it goes on here. And this is another issue I've had with the assembly of this kit. It's not a really nice clean fit, and it's, even though I tried to close up that gap as much as possible, it's still far from ideal. Anyway, so what I'll do is I'll use some super glue on this, and I'll just run it along the top. Okay, it's time to get the other engines stuck on, and they basically slide into these tabs on these side bits that we installed earlier. So what I'm going to do is I've also trimmed the wires as well for these ones. So let's get a bit of glue in here. Now I'm not using super glue here because I actually masked these holes off, so I know these should be alright. Okay, so that's one done. That's the next one done. And so what I'm going to be aiming to do is attach the top bit that goes in here along with the secondary engines, and basically all the wiring I'm going to sort of do at this end, and then feed, join all these positives together, join all negatives together, and feed them back into the post. Okay, the next bit is attaching the bottom part of the hull to the stand here. So I'm just going to literally pressure fit. Let's try it that way. Now, just to give you a bit of a preview, here's the other one that I've sort of still got stuck together, and I've actually done them at different heights, and the reason for that is just because I think it makes it look a bit more interesting, just having the two of them sitting next to each other. Get the bottom of the hull there. Just work out which way this goes. I think it goes that way, isn't it? So this is all sort of supposed to join up together. And again, it's something that's not really that doesn't quite fit the way it should. And then we have this really bizarre sort of way that it's all sort of attached, like yeah, something like that. So it's all very yeah, all very strange. That's alright, we will tally forth. So a bit of glue in here. I want this the hard way. You definitely want to glue this bit in, just because the way that I'm sort of building it up will come off when you put the top part of the hull on. So I'll just set that up a little bit, and then we should be able to line this bottom piece off. The decal has settled in beautifully. Look how good those decals look. Okay, so I think that's my favourite bit of this kit is the decals, as the rest of it's been driving me up the wall. Okay, so this goes. So I think one of these is going to not be like the other one. And so if I can point out the mistakes that I'm making here, hopefully if you got this kit, you're not making the same mistakes as me. Because I think this model, these models will be going in the naughty corner with the other kits that have sort of given me grief. It's not quite to the point where I want to throw it out the window. I haven't sort of got to that point just yet. But there's been a couple of times where I just think, oh, this is driving me nuts. You know, I'm not one for giving up on a kit, given that, you know, usually these things aren't cheap, so I'm not a big fan of sort of just throwing it out if it doesn't quite work. Alright, so time to point out the problem that I had with the other one. And it comes about because of trying to line this bottom hull part up properly, and these little points here is what's caused me grief, and I ended up having to cut them off on this one because I thought that was the problem. Now it doesn't look too bad from the side, obviously it's still sort of gluing up, but there's a massive gap here which shouldn't be here. And if you have a look down the guts of it, you can see that it doesn't sit down as much as what it should. This is where I'm hoping I get it right on this one. And it has to do with the bit that sort of interacts with these two tabs here. So I'm sort of hoping that at least this one I can sort of get right. But this one, there's nothing I can do, just because I've sort of glued it up, and what's actually stopping it from going all the way down is the end of this bit here. So, you know, I did sort of dry fit it and it worked okay, but for whatever reason, once I started gluing everything up, it all went pear-shaped. So I think this one's going to be, yeah, not that great. Alright, now it's time to get this top bit stuck on the top of the hull. So it has of points that it attaches to. When you push it in, just be careful of it. But I think that's where we want to be at. And see, this is where I'll be able to join up all the wires and just sort of wrap them up in here. So literally it'll just be two wires coming out the bottom, ready to go on the post. Alright, so now I'm going to use some blue tack to hold the wires in place, and I'm going to sort of try and get them laid down somewhere. And I'm just going to use some UV resin to sort of pin them in place. Alright, so I need to feed these larger wires through because they will inevitably be going down the post. Just using my old faithful UV resin here. Now you could use super glue or even hot glue to do the same thing here. It's really just to make sure the wires don't sort of get crimped when I join it together. If it comes undone later on down the track, it's not an issue because it's all sort of glued together. It's really just a temporary measure. So the engines, whole top bit is sort of ready to go. Now it's a matter of joining this to the bottom part of the hull. Okay, time to get the top part of the hull attached to the bottom. So I've got that here, everything's all dry, glue set ready to go. So now I need to feed these wires down the middle of the post. What I do want to do is get some glue in these post holes here, because that's essentially what's going to hold it all together. Let's get some tape on that. Yeah, so it's interesting. Got exactly the same problem as the other one. You can see at the back, it's maybe a bit hard to see. It should be sitting down a bit lower, and it's just not. It's just not. Oh, I think they might have had a win there. We might have just needed a bit of finagling. That is better. Okay, so it looks like it's sitting down more like what it's supposed to, but the whole thing still feels very fragile. It's all a bit higgledy-piggledy. Yeah, so I can't say I'm a fan of the construction method for this kit. It's pretty ordinary. Now if I try and get these, I don't know, side by side or something, it's a bit hard to tell, but that one on the top, you can see how the engines sit a little bit lower than the one in the bottom there. So, I mean, look, when they're right next to each other you notice. If they're sitting away from each other, I don't think it'll be that noticeable. Anyway, that's where it's at. So the next step is to do all the wiring. Actually, it's not. No. This is the one I did earlier, and there's these two little radar domes that go on the bottom there. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that on camera, so I'll get that done on this one. And I just use a bit of super glue just to get them in place. So I'll do that, and then we'll be ready for the wiring up of the electronics. Okay, the hull has had time to dry and set in place, and so now I've just put in the USB socket, and out of that comes one positive and one negative. The negative from the USB socket to the LEDs I've already soldered together. I've just joined those. But what I do need to do is solder up the switch and the resistor. So for these 4 LEDs, I've got them, they're rated at 3 volt voltage drop, and I'm running them at sort of between 5 and 10 milliamps. So for that, I'm just using a 120 ohm resistor. I'm going to feed this through and hook it over. So just like that, and then I'm going to solder it in place. Alright, so for the switch, basically one of these points goes to the LED positive wire, and the other one goes to the positive wire of the positive terminal of the USB socket. And it doesn't actually matter which one the resistor goes on, because basically when the switch is set to on, you get the current going through anyway. So I need to cut some heat shrink just to make sure I insulate this stuff. Let's see, I need to get some solder on the end of the resistor. Heat shrink on here. Of course, you want to do that before you solder it all together. Put the heat shrink on and make a little hook go through the hole in the terminal. Just helps to hold it in place. And that's essentially it. It's not a particularly complex circuit. I might just take a little bit of heat shrink just to put over the end of these guys. Alright, so I'm just going to use one little gas burner to shrink the heat shrink. Now I should be able to tuck all of this into the base. Okay, let's try it now. There we go, that's better. Take the wire into place, get the bottom on. And the other thing I've done is I've stuck on those little radar domes. They're a bit hard to see, but they were very fiddly. There's a lot about this kit that is fiddly. Alright, now, moment of truth to plug it in and see if it actually works. Alright, looks like we have a winner. Okay. Alright, so I want to sort of talk a little bit about a few final thoughts on these kits before we go to the beauty shots. First of all, I appreciate the fact that HMA Toys have actually built a plastic kit of this craft. There's a lot of resin models around, I believe, of the Brünhild, but I haven't seen a lot of sort of plastic kits. What I would really like is for someone to actually make a larger styrene kit of this, so 1/2000 scale or something like that, something a bit more substantial that you could really go to town lighting up on. This kit is definitely not for beginners. It is fiddly, there are lots of kind of quirks in the way that it's put together. Yeah, it's a great representation of the Brünhild. It seems pretty accurate to me as far as the way it looks and the proportions and everything. But yeah, it is a very fiddly kit, and I'm not sort of talking about fiddly as in terms of just small pieces. It's fiddly as in trying to get, some of the superstructure sort of together and what have you. But saying that, I'm reasonably happy with the build. I'm more happy with this one than the other one I did, and the reason is just because the way the top sits on this one. So I've already mentioned the other one sort of sits a bit higher, had some issues putting the top of the hull on. So that's it, on to the beauty shots. Until next video series, I'll catch you later.